Just to kind of give you a little more background, yes, I'm a teacher at a community college, but before I was that, I was a systems integrator out in the field. So a lot of what I tell my students is I don't come to this as a teacher. I come to this as someone who's been in the field. So 10 years working in various industries, both in the U.S. and abroad, doing control systems work. I've seen everything from a walk up to the SCADA panel with the Sharpie written password on the front of the panel that says this is how you get in. So cybersecurity has kind of been something that I've had to deal with for quite a number of years. And one of the things that we did, like Tim mentioned, we started with the automation competency model that ISA and Automation Federation put together and built an automation associate degree around that. And then what we found out is, as we talked to some folks in the industry, we needed to go a little bit beyond just the automation side of things and start looking at how the automation part plays into the larger space around the critical sites and the critical infrastructure that feed those sites, whether it's the telecom system, whether it's the power utilities, transportation, and so forth. And so one of the things that we started doing as we talked with these folks is that there was a convergence in the technologies, and I think someone mentioned that earlier, is we use a lot of information technology to connect all of our different systems and all of our different resources. And so as a result of this convergence in technology, everything's got an Ethernet port on it now. So as we looked at different ways to put this thing together, I'm actually department chair for the industrial systems group at the college, and my project manager on this grant is the department chair for the information technology coursework. So Jonathan teaches the networking and the IT and the Cisco Academy and all that stuff, and I teach the automation, and in my group is the electronics group, and we have the industrial systems group and so forth. And so we kind of brought those two groups together because we needed to kind of approach this thing from two sides. And so I think Samar mentioned having co-located people is really interesting to see and sit in these conversations with my counterpart, and they're looking at making sure you change your password every so often, and the social engineering side of it, and of course like I said, no credit cards are hacked. Well, if they get my credit card number, they got $5 open to buy on something. I'm more interested in making sure that someone doesn't shut down my nuclear reactor or cooling facility, or someone doesn't shut down my manufacturing process, because in 30 seconds I can shut down a process that takes 15 hours to get started back up again. So there's a lot of financial impact that can take place in a very, very quick amount of time. So as a result of that, what we did was we put together a proposal to the Department of Labor. And we were fortunate enough to land a TAC grant in round 3, and we got $23 million in change. And I laugh after working with community college budgets, if you've ever worked with your local community college, to have a 0.2 and we, billion dollars, and we refer to it as and change, puts a different mindset on things a little bit. The program was awarded in 2013. We started October 1, 2013, so we're a little over a year and a half or so into the project. And the goal of this is to develop a degree in mission critical operations. It's an associate's degree or 2-year degree. And we're working with several other colleges in the grant, both across North Carolina and in Georgia. And the goal of this is to develop sort of a pilot program for mission critical operations that can be then used across the country. And that's one of the goals that DOL gave to us, is that all of this work, and I think my final slide is my copyright information and stuff, it's actually going to be posted under Creative Commons, so it's going to be open source when we get finished with it. So if anyone wants to use this for internal house training, or if they want to use this with their local community college or local university, a lot of this information is going to be published and will be open source basically. So our definition of mission critical operations is up here. This is kind of a collaboration of different things that folks in our advisory committees came up with, and basically any operation that requires round-the-clock supervision of systems is aimed at combating the evolving threat of critical infrastructure operations failure. And kind of like heard mentioned earlier, we try to stay technology neutral in this. We don't want to throw anybody under the bus. We want to, because everybody's got things that they can do, or they can always do better. And so we try to look at this from kind of a holistic point of view, because we need to incorporate not only the IT side of things but also the OT side of things. And of course, we're not aimed at one particular industry. I think the slide had the 16 critical infrastructure sectors up there a few minutes ago that Agent Nelson had up. And so we've got data centers, we've got hospitals, we've got labs, both R&D labs, medical labs, financial institutions, communications companies, 911 call centers, all these different kinds of facilities out there, manufacturing sites. Everything has some type of critical infrastructure feed to it, whether it's the telephone lines, whether it's the internet connection, whether it's the blacktop highway that runs up to runs up to the site. And then, of course, all of these different sites, regardless of what kind of site they are, they have certain things in common. They all have HVAC systems. Mentioned that's how they got into Target. Power supplies. There's security on each facility. All of these different types of subsystems all have controls involved with them, wherever the location might be. We have a lot of data centers. This is a photograph of Facebook, which is about 30 miles from our location. And, of course, one of the reasons they picked where they are is because geographically and economically and so forth, this was a good spot for them to go. So workforce that was there, communications that was there, and so forth. So a lot of these, regardless of whether you're a hospital, whether you're, I went to a critical operations conference in Charlotte, and one of the guys, they got to talking about prisons, and I never really thought about prisons as being a place that was a critical site operation. But let the control system go down, and all the jail doors fly open. Yeah, that's a pretty critical site. Never really thought about it until they put it that way. So here's our partners at Cleveland Community College. Now, this is not Cleveland, Ohio, or Cleveland, Tennessee, or Cleveland, Georgia. Cleveland is the county that we're in, and we're about 30 miles west of Charlotte. So if you're familiar with where Charlotte, North Carolina is, now you know where I'm from, which is why I talk the way I do. But our partners are Wake Tech, which is in Raleigh, and Wake Tech is the largest community college in the state. Nash Community College is about an hour east of Raleigh. Moultrie Technical College is just south of Atlanta. And then our university partner is UNC Charlotte. So not only are we looking at this from a standpoint of creating a 2-year associate's degree, but we're also looking at an articulation pathway up to baccalaureate studies. And then UNC Charlotte's also got a good range of graduate studies that are available as well, so we can move into some of those different spaces in there. UNC Charlotte's also an NSA Center for Excellence in Cybersecurity, so we're getting some advising from those guys as far as how we need to dot our I's and cross our T's. Our industry partnerships kind of started from various different places. I mentioned my project manager, co-manager, Jonathan Davis. On the IT side, he'd worked with a group called 7x24 Exchange. Now, specifically the Carolinas chapter, but this is a national organization. And they actually represent a lot of end-user companies that some of you have probably heard of or some of you have probably dealt with on a daily basis. And this is just a small sampling of some of those companies that have memberships in 7x24. And these represent, like I said, a lot of the end users. So these are the folks that are using standards such as we talked about earlier this morning and trying to apply them in different ways. And they were coming to us. They're the ones that are doing the hiring. I think someone mentioned earlier, how do our people on the front lines, how do they work with these standards and stuff? And so that was one of the questions that a lot of these folks had was there's no training program for critical systems or critical operations, and so we need something that can kind of fill that gap in there that kind of sits across whether you're an IT tech or whether you're an automation tech or whatever. And so that's kind of the space that we're trying to fill. So from our industry partners from the 7x24 Exchange side, that's a lot of the end users. And then our other partners, this group right here, ISA and Automation Federation, you've probably heard a good bit about them today. They're actually partners with us in this grant as well. And I'll talk more about the partnership with ISA in a little bit. But Automation Federation was founded by ISA, but they have these other organizations that are also members in them. And this represents an international group. Some of you are probably members of some of these organizations and probably know some of these organizations. But one of the things that I thought that was really interesting about the site operations is there's a wide range of things here. CABA, for example, is automated buildings, automated building systems. And so in a conversation with someone who mentioned cell phones being a prime, way to get in now, I was in a conference call with a fellow and he got interrupted. He says, I got to go deal with a problem. And someone with a Wi-Fi accessed Android smartphone figured out what the password was and got into a secure floor in a high-rise building in New York. And it was just, there it was. I think he was 18. So he just walked in off the street. So a lot of these different organizations, we all have a lot of things that are in common as far as different sites and different critical operations that are in there. So without boring you with a lot of details, someone mentioned keeping the NIST standards short. Our application to DOL was longer than the NIST framework was. So I won't bore you with all of those details, but I'll go over some of the bullet points so you kind of get an idea of kind of what we're doing here. Of course, our articulation that we're looking at is not only at other community colleges and the crosswalk between those, but also with university systems. Our information technology program of the side of the house has had conversations with East Carolina University, and our operations technology, our industrial section, has had communications with the engineering department at UNC Charlotte. And from those conversations, we're starting to get hits from other universities and other colleges around the world. one of our oversight bodies, you'll hear from in a little bit, is actually NC State. So they're kind of watching over us and making sure we dot our I's and cross our T's and keep everybody at DOL happy. We're also looking at credit by credential. So if you have a credential already from industry standard out there now, we're looking at that as being a way to possibly give you some academic credit so you can kind of shorten that gap. If you've already got Security Plus or you're already a CISSP or something like that, we don't need to send you through basic networking security. You've already done that, so we can grant you access to that. And then, of course, credit by experiential learning. So if you've got a supervisor on a company letterhead that'll sign off and say you can do this, then we're good for a lot of the entry-level courses as well. Course design, identifying mission-critical competencies, and I won't go over all of this, but I will mention that, and it's going to come up on the next slide here in just a minute, we've actually done job task analysis of what a mission-critical operator should look like and what their job descriptions are. And from those competencies, we're starting to build our coursework out from that. And of course, those job task analysis were directed at the credential development. The Certified Mission Critical Professional, the CMCP there, is where our partnership with ISA comes in. ISA's existing credential standards, we're kind of leveraging some of those resources in developing the new CMCP, and hopefully it'll be ready next year. But what the CMCP is going to do is it's basically looking at kind of the 2-year level from the academic side of things of someone who works in the mission critical operations space and some of the different types of resources that they have to keep in mind and work with. The Certified Mission Critical Operators aimed at kind of 1 year of academic levels. And our partnership with those guys, our partnership on that is with CompTIA. Some of you may be familiar with CompTIA on the IT space. They do A+ and Net+ and Sec+ and Linux Plus, all that stuff. So we started to call it Mission Critical Plus, and they just kind of laughed at us and said, no, we're not good at there. But that's who we're working with on that. So we'll have a CompTIA certification and we'll have an ISA certification when this grant is through. The associate degree is kind of the main part that we're working with, and I'm working on both sides of this, not only the credential side but also on the academic side. From the credential side, you do not have to have someone who has gone through the academic program. They can sign up and sit for the exams, and then when they're through, then they have a CMCP certification or a CMCO certification when they're through. So that's from the operator standpoint, that's a good entry place to look at. One of the things that we wanted to do is say, mission critical operators, the people that are in charge of mission critical spaces, a lot of times have several years in the field. But if you're wanting to get into that space, how do you get into that space? And so this is a third-party verification of the entry-level set of skills that you need to get into that space, and to say, look, I understand what mission critical is, and I'm not going to let someone tailgate me through the front door at the office or something like that, because I'm aware of what those ramifications are. Introduction and associated support services. I won't bore you with this, but one of the things that we are doing is working with our our workforce development boards in the local areas at each of the different colleges, and working with the local industry and saying, what kind of responses do you need? What kind of people do you need? How many people do you need? And when do you need them? So we can develop those programs and develop them as needed. The telepresence piece is something I'm working with. This is one thing that kind of falls into the cybersecurity area of this. One of the requirements that Department of Labor gave us was that our program, because it was going to be a very unique program in the country, students needed to be able to take classes from anywhere. And so the telepresence piece allows us to have a distance learning element to this coursework where students can, if they have a web browser, they can log in and take classes. So it doesn't matter where they are, as long as they have an IP address. They're a student or potential student. And so that was one of the things that we were very excited about working with this. And what we realized was a lot of times in industry, 1 or 2 or 3 people have access to a particular piece of equipment. So being able to scale that same type of an environment up to a classroom, that's getting to be a little bit more of a challenge than we thought it was going to be. But tied into that is the cybersecurity element and so forth. And so we've actually had a couple of industries that said, how are you handling some of that, scaling up of multiple people logging in? Because I'd like to give that to my techs in the plant floor too, so that we can kind of borrow some of that same type of ideas there. Collaboration and evaluation. This is where IACS, and I think you'll hear from John in a few minutes, they're doing our evaluation for us to make sure that we have everything that we need to make DOL happy. But in addition to making the Department of Labor happy, we need to make sure that the industry that we're serving is happy. So if you want more information about the project, NCMCO.US is our website, National Consortium for Mission Critical Operations. And you can get information about what we're doing there and keep up with us. That's my contact information there, and I believe these presentations will be available to everyone when this is done. Jonathan there is my co-project manager. His background's in IT and healthcare. He worked in the hospital system for a while before he came to the college as well, so different sides of this as well. Okay, I think that's it. There's my disclaimer for the end of it. We'll save the question session for later then. Thank you.